Welcome to Buddha at the Gas Pump. My name is Rick Archer. Buddha at the Gas Pump is an ongoing series of interviews or conversations with spiritually awakening people. I've done hundreds of them now, and if this is new to you and you'd like to check out previous ones, please go to batgap.com, B-A-T-G-A-P, and look under the past interviews menu. This program and all the time we put into it is made possible by the support or through the support of appreciative listeners and viewers. So if you appreciate it and would like to support it in any amount, please click on, there's a PayPal button on every page of the site, and there's also a donate page with other alternatives if you don't like dealing with PayPal. My guest today is Sarah Taylor. And I met Sarah at the Science and Non-Duality Conference last October, and we hit it off and had some fun together. And I think at that point Sarah wasn't feeling like she was quite ready to do an interview, but now she is, and so here we go. Go ahead.
I was like, I don't know, Rick, not yet.
Yeah.
We'd check in through email. I'm like, I don't know. I'll let you know.
That's always a good sign. We're much more inclined to interview people who have that attitude than people who are champing at the bit,
No.
And I kind of met Sarah because she and I are both friends with Susanna Marie, who recommended her and who's been sort of a mentor for her.
She's wonderful.
Yeah. So a little bit about Sarah. I'm just going to read the first part of her bio and let her fill in the rest.
Okay.
Sarah is an actor, a writer, a stand-up comedian. Can you be funny sitting down, or do you have to be standing up?
Never. I always have to be standing up, Rick. It just doesn't work if you're sitting down.
So you're not going to be funny in this interview then?
Not at all. It's going to be a very serious, humorless interview.
So she's those things, and she's also a spiritual and creative mentor living in Los Angeles. As a child, creativity and spirituality were in the forefront of her life. The lived experience of unity faded as trauma and stress from a troubled home edged out this awareness. But as Sarah began to discover singing and acting, she was hooked on the transcendence they evoked. Creativity became her church. And actually, I wrote down another little thing from... Sarah's working on a book, and I've read a few rough drafts of some chapters, and it's going to be a very good book because she's a good writer and she's been living a fascinating life. But here's something maybe we can start with. And feel free to just sort of elaborate and fill in and take us off on tangents. But at age 4 or 5 on the playground at school, you would stand on the wood chips amongst the swing sets and slides and with eyes open gaze at the space in front of you until you were the space. Vast, tranquil nothingness and everythingness. It was all around you and you were it. Ah, home. I replaced I with you just to read that. Right. But anyway, is that a good starting place?
Yeah, sure. I think the funny thing about this is that, and maybe this is the way it is for a lot of people who come to spirituality later on and then go, oh, I remember this feeling. Mm-hmm. I felt it as a child.
Yeah.
I think we all are connected like that when we're young. So I don't think it's just for special people have it. But yeah, as soon as I started meditating and having deep experiences later on the spiritual path, I was like, oh, that's what I was doing. And it actually was kind of a specific meditation in the Dzogchen tradition called Awareness of Awareness, which I guess Padmasambhava, who was an 8th century Buddhist meditation master, taught. And it's just gazing downwards and, resting in awareness, but, holding inside and outside at the same time. And yeah, it was so. It was an escape, when I was a child. Just I'd also sort of lie on my bunk bed, the bottom bunk bed, and look up at a wood knot just above me, mm-hmm. and I'd just focus on that until I was taken into a transcendent place. And so I must have been 6 or 7 or 8. So it started out. I mean, I think it was. Kind of my lived experience. I remember looking around at my family and going, wow, everybody's just really running around. Like, this is what people do. Okay. All right. Okay. Kind of being a witness to it in a way. and then it became sort of an escape, I think. And then around, I think, 7 or 8, those experiences, I can't really remember them. There was a kind of a shutting down that happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Our friend Susanna said a similar thing, that she felt it slipping away, and it was like, I think she was maybe you can relate to trying to hold on to it. Oh, I don't want to lose this, but then life just kept intensifying and kind of slips away.
I think for me it was more like the survival mechanism, the fight or flight mechanism, with how highly strung my nervous system was becoming.
Yeah.
Because I had a troubled home. Nobody has a perfect upbringing, but it was a bit troubled, and so. When the nervous system is really keyed up, that edges out, so much.
Yeah, that's why so many meditation practices are designed to get the nervous system unkeyed up, because a more settled mind and nervous system is more conducive to the clarity and the transcendence.
Totally. And for anybody who's suffered trauma, I mean, and they say, well, I'm not good at meditation, or, I want the spiritual path. I want to wake up. I want to, whatever. But, I don't want to do meditation. I'm usually like, try it, because it's so soothing. It's so calming, and it rewires your nervous system. I mean, you know this.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And, I mean, I suppose it's not too much of a stretch for people to hear meditation and nervous system in the same sentence, because everything we experience has a physiological basis or a neurophysiological basis. And if it's a significant experience or a significant shift in awareness, there should be a significant shift in the physiology.
Mm-hmm. There sure is. And I found just on my path that trauma, even after very significant realizations, the nervous system, it keeps bumping you offline.
Mm-hmm.
They've
done studies on meditation where they'll expose long-term meditators to a very stressful experience, like a loud, sudden, unexpected sound, and the nervous system will react. But there's a sort of much quicker recovery time from those things. It gets back to stasis much sooner.
Well, yeah, there's something about like the nervous system set point.
Yeah.
That there's a set point. So apparently the nervous system doesn't like to go way up and way down.
Right.
So if you're very young when you're developing as a human being, and you're learning that you need to be on high alert, your set point will be higher. The nervous system goes, okay, I don't want to go up and down like this, so let's just stay right here and keep it high.
Interesting.
So, yeah. I mean, I'm no trauma expert, but I've learned some things
I think that's true.
path.
I mean, that's part of the deal with PTSD. It just there's been so much excitation or agitation or trauma, the nervous system gets habituated to functioning that way. The fight flight response, which is supposed to be a momentary thing that's important in a saber-toothed tiger incident, but if it happens often enough, it becomes the norm.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But the bright side of this discussion is that no matter how much of that has been piled on through stressful incidents, it can all be unwound and deconditioned, and we can get back to a very beautiful style of physiological functioning. And that too has research on it. They do research on PTSD sufferers and so on.
The nervous system can heal, the body can heal, the mind heals, the brain heals, new neural pathways develop. So, and awakening helps that. You know? I mean, my God, I mean, I didn't get in this with like, I want to wake up. I mean, I just wanted to sleep better at night. I had anxiety. I was a very anxious person, and I had stage fright, but yet I loved performing. And so it was this push-pull of like, well, I love doing this, but I kind of throw up before I do it. Gee, is that normal? So I was just like, oh, I guess I'll learn meditation. And then I got way more than I bargained for. So.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, we're jumping ahead a little bit. Now, I don't want to have you talk about anything you don't want to talk about, but so you can give a very short answer if you wish. But for the sake of those, and there are probably many, who also went through traumatic childhoods, is there anything you can say to make your experience a little bit more specific or concrete so that people can relate and say, wow, if she went through that, then maybe there's hope for me?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think with any type of trauma, you feel like your boundaries are being crossed. So there was a lot of that, and just feeling like there's a threat to the organism, like there's some sort of threat, even if it's, psychological and emotional abuse is can be just as devastating as physical abuse. So I found that sometimes people, they don't, that maybe they weren't physically abused, and they say, what, everything's fine, I don't know why I'm so so anxious, I don't know why I have so many problems, I don't know why but emotional abuse can feel like a physical abuse. So emotional abuse, sexual abuse is a a crossing of boundaries. It's actually something you can point to and go, whoa, this happened, even though people block it out, as a survival mechanism. So whether the trauma, was emotional or physical, it apparently the nervous system and the brain responds similarly. And I don't know if you're familiar with Peter Levine's work. He's got a great book, Waking the Tiger, that I highly recommend for people to read if they've had any kind of trauma in their background. He says that things like, a surgery when you're 4 years old, or 3, or, before the age of 7 or something, he's saying can be extremely traumatic, which I had. I had a list of things that were wonderful in my childhood, but everybody did their best. So, there's no blame or anything, but, it is what it is. But yeah, so, falling off your bike and not being able to discharge that energy. And Peter Levine talks about this, in a much, much more eloquent way, but, even just falling off your bike when you're like 6 and trying to ride a bike, and if it's a hard fall, and you have let's say a parent is saying, get back up on the bike, and you don't have a chance to discharge the energy and to cry and to go, that was scary, and to shake a little bit, then it stuffs down. It gets stuffed down.
Yeah.
So our nervous systems are filled with stuffed down stuff.
I'll bet that circumcision creates a lot of stuffed down stuff for little infants that don't know what the heck is going on, and all of a sudden they must carry all kinds of sexual issues.
Maybe, yeah. I wonder if there's some research done on that. Yeah.
In a couple of weeks, I'm going to interview a guy who wrote a book called Soul's Gift and another one called Soul's Plan. And basically, he seems to be saying that even if we're abused, there may be exceptions to this, and I've only read a little bit of his book so far, but even if we're abused, it's like we actually made a plan for that to happen as we came into this life, and it may have been done in collaboration with our abuser, and the abuser might have said, oh, I really don't want to do this, I love you, I can't possibly treat you that way, and we will say, but I want you to, because I need to have that experience in order to undergo such and such a growth. I mean, do you think that there's any validity to that way of thinking? Or
I do.
Do you?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm grateful for my life. And, we're all one organism. We're all one thing.
Yeah.
So we're all in cooperation. Even somebody like Donald Trump, he's playing a role. I can just imagine him before having to land in a body. He's like, what? You want me to do what? But yeah, everybody's kind of playing a role so that, my view is so that humanity can evolve, in some way. And that involves the individual, evolving the individual consciousness.
Yeah. All the world's a stage, and each man in his time plays many parts, right?
Yeah.
We have our exits and our entrances.
That's right. Shakespeare.
Yeah.
So it was all this stuff that I was doing, kind of going into a meditative, absorbed state when I was very young. What was actually probably really helpful for my nervous system, and then I kind of forgot about it, and tried to fit in and everything, and then I discovered singing when I was about 14, and that was when the transcendent started returning.
Oh, really? So that wasn't a long hiatus. If you went from 9 to 14 and then it started returning already, that's pretty good.
Or it was probably about maybe 6 or 7, 6, and then 14. But I misunderstood it. I thought, oh wow, so this singing thing, this creative thing that I do, whether it's writing or acting out little characters for my family, or acting out scenes with my dolls in my room or something when I was little or something. So I guess I was feeling it then too. There was a stillness and a spaciousness and an interconnectedness and a peace that would descend. So that kind of hooked me. It was very pronounced when I was 14 and when I began singing. I mean, music really can do that to all of us. But I got hooked on it. I was like, oh well, I got to keep doing this. Yeah. And then I discovered acting, and so it was all, so performing gave me that doorway into presence and peace and interconnectedness.
Yeah. But you did go through quite a period, it seems, of being kind of dependent upon antidepressants, and you were drinking, and all kinds of stuff happened. So I mean,
sure.
How long? I mean, let's touch on that a little bit without belaboring it too much.
Yeah. I mean, when I found performing, it was a really exhilarating time. But again, I misunderstood it and was like, oh great, I got to keep doing this thing so I can feel that way. I went to a college for the arts. I went to American Conservatory Theater in San Francisco, and then went to California Institute of the Arts. And I got a degree in acting, which makes you lots of money. But I had developed this identity of Sarah the actor, Sarah the performer, because that was the only time I really felt connected to everything, alive. You get it. So what happened upon graduation? Every college graduate goes through a tough time. I was no different. But graduating from an art school, I could, looking back now, that identity was starting to be seen through, and like it wasn't fitting. I was trying to do the Hollywood thing and getting an agent and going on auditions, and I was like, wow, why doesn't this feel the way it did when I was, acting and performing, and why does this feel different? Well, because now you're supposed to go make a living at it. But there was also something about knowing what I am beyond that I think was starting to dawn. And I went to massage school so that I could learn, a trade, so that I could support myself. And so it was in massage school where I feel like I had the beginnings of a Kundalini awakening, because energy started, moving through me a lot. And you know how Kundalini works. It's you get very energized, and the stuff was coming to light. And I fell into a really deep depression. I fell into a very, very deep depression, and depression was not something new to me. I would fall into these bouts of depression. When I was 15, I tried to kill myself. I took a bottle of sleeping pills, and I lay on the bed, and I did what I always did when I was a child, which was, rest my attention on my breath. And it took me into a very still, quiet place. And I had a vision of me acting on stage, and something in me said, get off the bed, don't die, because go do this thing.
So you got up and went and vomited or something?
Yeah, I went into my, the living room where my parents were, and I said, I have good news and bad news. I was like, the bad news is I just swallowed a bunch of sleeping pills, but the good news is I'm going to be an actress. So, and they were like, what? Like, what are you talking about? So, but it was from that day I had a sort of purpose. So out of that darkness came this vision, and I was like, that's what I'm going to do. That's what I'm going to be. So, here I am, just graduated from this art school, and I'm in another depression. But yet I didn't feel identified with the Sarah, the actress. So I felt aimless, and I didn't know what to do, because acting and performing had been my thing, my doorway into the divine.
It's interesting that the stirring up of Kundalini would coincide with depression. Usually people well, it can coincide with all kinds of things, I suppose, but most often it seems like it stirs up some bliss or some...
Oh, yeah, it sure did.
Oh, okay.
It sure did, yeah. I mean, for a while. I mean, then Kundalini visited me again in 2011, and that was a ride. But
we'll get to that.
Yeah, lots of bliss and lots of energy and feeling great. And then it starts kicking up all the sediment in the system.
Yeah.
So it starts kicking up all the sediment in the system, and I fell into a depression. And so I went to one of those low-cost clinics, because I didn't have any insurance, and they listened to me say, "I'm depressed," and the guy wrote down, "She's depressed," on the little piece of paper, whatever he was, coming up with my diagnosis. And then I said, "Oh, by the way, bipolar illness runs in my family," and he went, "Oh," and he just crossed it off and said, "Bipolar too."
Oh, brother.
And handed it to me and said, "You need to be on this medication," and I was very happy to have a new identity.
Bipolar lady.
That's right. So I'm from actor lady to, that's what it is. That's what it is. And, we know that trauma can masquerade as a lot of different physical illnesses. And
you thought you were going to be like Jonathan Winters, I guess.
Maybe, I don't know. Or Patty Duke.
Yeah.
Who knows? But, now there are a lot of great examples of people with bipolar doing wonderful things. But it turned out to be a misdiagnosis. That wasn't really what was happening. So I was put on...
Which tells you something right there. I mean, how many millions of kids are there in this country who are on various medications because of some snap judgment by some,
Yeah. So, I just took that diagnosis then to another psychiatrist and said, "So I'm bipolar too." And, I was such a good little actress, I'll play that role. Please give me an identity. I need one. So the medication numbed me.
Yeah.
I'm not anti-medication. I think it's helpful for people if it can get them over a hump, or if they, really... If they're destabilized without it. But yeah, I was on it for about 10 years.
What kind of medication was it?
There was a mood stabilizer, and there were always 2 different antidepressants that the shrink was trying out.
I remember one time when I was a teenager, when I was taking drugs, trying a tranquilizer one time just for kicks. And I thought, God, this is horrible. It's so numbing, to use your word, just so flat, so blah. How can anybody stand to live like this?
Yeah, and that's I felt tranquilized.
Yeah.
I found out that one of the initial medications that they gave me, when I looked it up online later, and it said it's that's what it does. It tranquilizes you. So it was just here, kid, go sleep for a while.
Yeah.
And that's not what we need. I'm sure we have a long way to go with understanding
Oh yeah.
Mood disorders and mental illness, but not everybody needs to be on medication. So
what got you out of that phase?
Well, I'm so grateful for the internet, because I just started doing research and going on these message boards and stuff. Facebook wasn't invented yet, and just going, wow, this doesn't feel like me. All these people are having these horrible side effects from medication, and playing around with their medication to try to get the right cocktail, and so I was definitely searching for something, for sure, and I eventually kind of came to the conclusion that I didn't think I needed to be on it anymore. And of course, being the good little people pleaser that I am, I went to my shrink that I'd meet up with every month and say, I think, can we start lowering the dosage? And he was like, yeah. And then eventually I was like, I think I want to go off it. What's going to happen? and he just looked at me and said, I think that's a great idea. And he agreed. He said, I think you're going to be okay. But he did ask me, he said, so what are you going to do to support you instead of the medication? I said, well, I think I'm going to take a meditation class. So that's how it began. And so I guess that was 2005 that I got off the medication. And you have to detox that stuff out of your system.
Yeah.
Like it's a but right around that same time I was feeling this urge to write and perform what it was that I was writing. So I was, taking some classes about, performing what you write, kind of solo show type of stuff. And then I took a meditation class from my friend Angela, who taught me a meditation with, chakras and stuff. And then I got into some therapy. Finally getting into therapy, because I was always seeing a psychiatrist rather than actually talking to somebody about what was going on. So I got into therapy, and I went to my first Buddhist talk, and I was like, oh, this is cool. And funny, it was like right around the same time that I started doing stand-up. That something in me said, you got to go do stand-up. And I did think it was odd. I think you and I were talking about it before we started recording or something, that I've never been like a big fan of stand-up comedy. You'd never find me like in the comedy clubs, sitting there with a drink in hand, watching a comic. I was like, stand-up comedy, but something in me, was kind of pushing me to get on stage and do it. So I began meditating and doing stand-up comedy at the same time.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm not going to ask much of a question here. I want you to just keep going. Oh, I just did want to mention, though, that for those who are watching the live broadcast, if you feel like submitting a question, go to the upcoming interviews page on batgap.com, and you'll see a form at the bottom through which you can submit a question.
Cool.
All right. So you went to your first Buddhist meeting.
Yeah, and I was like, well, this is cool. That Buddha dude had some cool things to say. I remember I think I went with a couple of friends who were like, I don't know what they're talking about. And I was like, oh, it kind of makes sense to me. I don't know. Yeah. When I would read Buddhist teachings or hear a talk on it, there was a resonance for sure. And it felt very familiar to me. And so, I began having deep experiences I think right away.
Such as?
Well, I went to a meditation retreat, my first meditation retreat. My therapist, would lead these little Buddhist retreats up at a Zen center, and which was very helpful. And I didn't know what I was doing, because I was just sitting there in the, meditation zendo, kind of like, do I focus on my chakras? What do I do? Why am I here? I mean, I don't know why, I signed up for a 9-day meditation retreat kind of right off, like, let's do this. I became one-pointed and concentrated, and sort of a joy welled up in my chest. And this was the first retreat that I was on, and I remember being outside, and the trees were all around me, and I just took a breath in and focused on my heart, and there just was this bursting open. And I heard inside, welcome home. So, I've had lots of little intuitive pointers along the way, little voices inside, which somebody could probably diagnose as something. But you and I know better. But yeah, so it was a very deep kind of homecoming to go into meditation, which, doesn't mean that I stayed in these, absorbed states for, hours and hours or days at a time. I'd get bumped off of it because the nervous system was so, jacked up, and the mind is busy. And, but I became hooked. I became really, really hooked on meditation, and I began to meditate for hours and hours and hours a day. And I went on like 3 meditation retreats a year for a while. I found that I was able to go into what's called the jhanas. And, you know, I don't know a ton about Buddhism. I know that, you know, like through the whole time that I, you know, was on the Buddhist path and doing the practices, I'd start to read something about Buddhism, or I'd start to try to intellectually understand something, and I'd be like, ugh, I'm just going to meditate. Like I wanted the direct experience. I didn't want to get bogged down by. Yeah, that was really. I mean, I'm glad it was some sort of intelligence telling me, ugh, she's got enough stuff in her mind. Like, no, don't fill it with other stuff. So I began going into the jhanas, which are these 8 absorbed states. You know, there's like a very blissful state, there's a equanimous state, there's a state which you're connected with everything, there's the state of no thing, and then there's the, you know, the 8th jhana, which is, you know, neither, you know, perception or non-perception is what it's called.
And you weren't trying to go into specific jhanas, you were just spontaneously slipping into one or another?
Well, my teacher was talking about the jhanas and teaching them, and he did a great job with it because I just latched on.
When he would talk about one, you would find yourself being able to experience it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And I started coming to him with like, hey, you know, I was experiencing this, you know, sort of like falling into a white snowbank and being enveloped in just all white, and everything is spacious, and it goes on forever, and he'd say, oh, well, that sounds like the 4th jhana, and which the Buddha described as being wrapped in a white blanket from head to foot, or something like that.
Yeah.
So I would have these, you know, experiences, and I was hooked on that then.
So that kind of stirred up the Kundalini again, as I understand it.
That took a while. That was 2011. So I was meditating probably like 2006 to 2011.
About 5 years.
Yeah. And in 2011, I had an awakening. I mean, I'd had a glimpse into the nothingness of the small self. You know, a few years prior to that. Which actually you might enjoy hearing about this, in that, because we were talking about comedy before, in that, you know, I was in LA traffic, and it was like a glimpse, like a foretaste, you know, of seeing that who I had taken myself to be was really just a series of roles, you know, like we're putting on costumes and then taking them off, putting on costumes and taking them off. That it's fluid, that it's not fixed, it's not stable, it's not permanent. And I fell into the witness state, I guess, as UTMers would call it, deep emptiness, and a witnessing everything. And so I was just sort of this bag of emptiness, you know, going around doing comedy shows in LA, and it built my confidence at the time, because I hadn't really had a profound shift yet. But it built my confidence in emptiness and in presence and in being nobody, because I remember sitting in the back of the Comedy Store, and I had a bunch of shows that week, like at the Hollywood Improv and this other comedy club and the Comedy Store, and I'm sitting in the back, and I'm just this bag of emptiness, and I hear the host say, "And ladies and gentlemen, Sarah Taylor," and somehow, you know, I was thinking to myself, what's going to happen? I'm just this bag of emptiness. And, you know, I get on stage and I grab the mic, and jokes start coming out, you know, material starts coming out, you know, engagement with the audience comes out, you know, spontaneity. And so I had already had a sort of emptying out that occurred. I guess that was about in like 2009. So then the Kundalini mayhem ensued in 2011, which happened as a result of an awakening, of a real seeing that I'm made up, that the small me is made up, and it was a seeing of myself. It was actually visual for me, and I just watched myself go down a drain, and I, you know, felt this pop of just relief and expanse, and I kept banging the floor going, I'm free, I'm free. Like it was the whole, it was like fireworks, it was a fireworks type of, shaking and crying and laughing. And the next day or two later, as I was sitting in meditation, then the Kundalini erupted.
And what was that like? I mean, how did it erupt?
It was like a fire hose.
Shooting up your spine?
Yeah, totally. And luckily I just had that shift in seeing. So, and I think I was...
Probably wouldn't have erupted if you hadn't had it.
Yeah, right. Although you never know.
You never know.
Yeah, you hear some crazy stories. And I have some students and people who work with me who've had like big Kundalini openings, but they have no context for it. So, yeah. But yes, it was like a fire hose just going off from, bottom to top. And I just, thankfully knew enough to lie back on the bed and just let it move through me for about 20 minutes. Mm-hmm. And it was, every dark thought I'd ever thought, every self-harming thought, every, I'm worthless, it's awful, life sucks, I'm a piece of shit. Can we swear?
Yeah, sure.
Sure. Shit. And I just lay back on the bed and it all was just coming out, I guess, or coming through. And then the next day, a download through the top of my head.
Let's talk about the previous point first, and then we'll get into the download. And I think it illustrates a principle which probably most people listening to this are familiar with, but it's worth mentioning, which is that the body is like a container or an instrument through which anything is lived. But if there's a profound spiritual awakening, then, as we were talking about earlier, there has to be a correlation between that and the physiology. Mm-hmm. And if the physiology is full of crud, then and a profound spiritual awakening is happening or has happened, then that crud no longer belongs in that nervous system, because that nervous system isn't going to be able to support that kind of experience if it's full of crud. So the crud has to go, and there it goes, as you experienced.
Yeah, exactly. All those energetic knots loosening, and that wasn't the end of it. I mean, as many of your listeners and your viewers know, awakening just sort of like opens up the door, and then all the little demons come flying out, and people are like, "What happened? Why is this happening?" But yeah, it was many years of stuff rising to the surface. Mm-hmm. It was at that time that I went to my teacher and I said, hey, I'm wanting to talk about, the abuse and the trauma that I've experienced. And I remember him saying, why? You've just had this profound realization, like what, so he didn't really get it at first, but who knows why, but I sort of floundered for a few years because there was so much dark material coming forward. And so I got into therapy.
So as that dark material was coming forward, did the witness state, or the whatever you want to call it, abide or persist, and thereby give you the sort of stability to handle all that was coming up?
Not always. I mean, it was, real, back and forth. It was the I got it, I lost it, I got it, I lost it, I got it, I lost it thing. Mm-hmm. Which also is indicative of a culturing of the nervous system, because the nervous system can't just go from A to Z and snap on and be sustaining it. It has to sort of, and it tends to purify in waves. So there's a wave of purification, and then integration of that, and then a wave of purification, and that can go. That cycle can repeat for a long time. It repeats, and people always say like, "I just went through this. Why am I back here again?"
Yeah.
But it's a spiral. You just keep going deeper and deeper and deeper into the sediment. Just keeps coming up.
Yeah.
Every time there's an opening, there's a grate, then more of the crap can come through. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Sometimes I like to think of these openings or consciousness, if you will, as a solvent, and the way, let's say, water can be a solvent. You can dissolve things in it, and if you just have a cup, then you don't have very much water, so you can't dissolve very much. But if as the capacity of the water increases, then more and more can be dissolved. And if it becomes oceanic, you can throw in dump trucks full of mud or something, and they're just going to get dissolved because there's enough capacity.
Yeah. So something like that. So I kept saying, like, when's it all going to be dissolved? It was a very tough time. There was a lot. That was like 2011, 12, 13. Those were really, really, really hard years. My poor now husband. There was chaos all around me. Things were falling apart. Toxic relationships were dissolving. I was doubting what I wanted to do. There's been a lot of stops and starts on my path, and the doer, I couldn't kind of summon, getting back on stage and doing the grind of a stand-up comic. Like, it just wasn't coming. Yeah. So I stopped performing for about 4 years maybe. I just didn't. I had an agent, so I did this NBC show that was like a web series, and I did some other stuff. And I remember thinking, like, do I want to do this? What am I doing? It was all seeming meaningless. That whole stage of, I had seen that, the small self is more or less made up. It's transparent. It's not necessarily real in a fixed sense, and so is everything else. So it was a real chaotic time. It was a divine mess, as I like to call it. In that, the Kundalini was doing its thing. The body would shake from the Kundalini and move, and I would get sick a lot. The reactive patterns would recruit the Kundalini energy, and then I'd be in an inflamed state. I was doubting what I was doing. I didn't know where I was headed. Everything was changing around me, so it was very very chaotic. But also that, after that Kundalini awakening, like a day later, then there was some sort of download through the top of my head.
Oh yeah, you were going to talk about that.
Yeah.
Go ahead and do.
Well, we now know that, it's maybe universal Shakti, so perhaps that was personal Shakti that had become awakened, but there was a download of a very, very big energy that started moving through me. And so in the midst of all this chaos, I started doing energy healing work on people, which, thankfully people were helped by it and aided, by it, even though I was still, kind of stabilizing. And
perhaps it helped you to stabilize or integrate, to do that work.
I think it did. I think it did, because I felt like, well, I have to do something with this. I want to be of service. I want to, this energy that comes through wants to become, it wants to help, it wants to, do something.
Yeah.
And
when I became a meditation teacher, Maharishi said, well, teaching is one of the best things you can do for your own evolution and for your own integration, and that once you step into that role, then a lot more energy will come through you, or wisdom, or whatever. So
that's interesting.
The more you give away, the more you get, sort of thing.
Yeah, because in 2008 I began teaching meditation.
Right.
I didn't even think about it like oh, it's such a cliche. People get into spirituality and then start teaching. Like, I didn't even know that was a cliche. I just was like, oh gosh, I want to share this. So I remember thinking, oh my gosh, why don't other creatives know about this? And so I began, back in 2008, 2009. This was before the Kundalini mayhem. We'll get back to that. But yeah, I had a class called Comedy Karma for comics, where we would sit around and we'd meditate and then work on comedy material and share it with each other. And so I was, teaching meditation to the comics here in LA. And did that for a while, and then it just sort of became me teaching meditation at companies, and so a lot of the teaching that I was doing 10 years ago or 8 years ago or whatever was more like, meditation is really going to help you with anxiety. It's going to help decrease your stress, and of course through the years how I teach and how I work with people, of course, has changed. But yeah, I think maybe the teaching was very, 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 very beneficial, and help move me along. And it just always felt like, oh, well, this is something. It just felt very natural.
Yeah.
It felt very natural.
Yeah.
So Kundalini Mayhem.
Sounds like a good name for a rock band, maybe.
I know. We just thought of it. Let's do it. Can you play the guitar?
No, I'm a drummer.
Play the drums? Oh, you're a drummer. That's right. Oh, cool. Well, I kind of badly play the guitar and the ukulele. Not well, but, just enough to sort of sing loud enough that it, covers it up.
I don't know if the ukulele belongs in a band called Kundalini Mayhem.
You never know.
Sounds more like heavy metal to me.
Rock out. Why not? Non-duality, Rick. It all belongs.
Okay.
But yeah. So the Kundalini was going crazy, and the Shakti or whatever just pouring through me, and I think we were talking this past week that I went into right around this time I went into a Kinko's FedEx, and all the copiers stopped working.
Oh yeah.
And the guy was like, I don't know, this has never happened. There's like 8 copiers, and I was like, hold on a second. And I'd been learning about grounding my energy and dumping excess energy. I was learning all this personal energy stuff to help me.
Just to interject, I was on a long meditation. I've done a lot of long meditation courses, sometimes like 6 months at a time, and where you're doing all this long stuff, and weird things would happen. I mean, it was very, very common for watches to stop working and all, but also for glasses to explode. Water glasses and glass doors to explode, and I would walk into a room and the typewriter would break, but then I was also good at fixing things. So it's weird where this stuff happens. Yeah.
Yeah, it's super weird. I mean, there's like a laundry list. I won't bore your listeners with like just crazy things that happened during this time, where people finally just started turning to me and going, "Is that your energy? Stop it!" And I'm like, "It's not my energy. It's everybody's energy." But yeah, just crazy stuff was happening. A lot of chaos. But eventually things started kind of settling. Good therapy for anybody who's had any background of trauma and you're in an awakening or you want awakening is do as much healing work as you can. Do it. Having a trusted relationship with a qualified therapist. Shout out to Dr. Beth Leadham in Encino. She was incredible. So I saw her from like 2012 to, 2015 or something like that. And that was incredibly helpful. Doing energy healing work, not just on others, but going and getting energy healing work done on me. It was a real time of healing. Getting massages, being in the body, doing yoga. So for anybody going through something like that, it's so important to stay connected to the body and to develop good relationships with people if you've been through trauma.
And sometimes good old physical exercise can be very helpful. Like some kind of sport or jogging or whatever, swimming, whatever appeals to you.
I like to run.
Yeah.
And you do pickleball, right?
I do a lot of it.
Yeah. Pickleball.
Look it up, people. It's kind of like tennis. It's like tennis for old people.
It's tennis for old people. I don't know. I saw a video or something that you sent me. It looked insane. It was just so
the champions are young, but you can get good at it. Well, let's not get off on pickleball.
Okay, all right. Well, we could. We'll have a whole other Bat Gap interview about pickleball.
Yeah. So anyway, the Kundalini started to simmer down.
Kundalini started to simmer down. During this time, psychic stuff opened up as well.
Well, let's talk about that. That'll be interesting. Put your turban on and tell us about it.
So let me tell you,
Madam Sarah.
Madam Sarah, fortune teller. I did a bit of that. I actually started doing psychic readings. I was really like looking for why am I here and how do I give back? And
what am I supposed to do with all this stuff?
What does this all mean? I know that's the common thing that people get into. What do I do with it? What do I do with it? And first and foremost, it's for us to help us navigate our way because there's more to be done. But yeah,
So
dead
what were
people
some
started.
specific psychic experiences you had,
Well,
just out of curiosity? Not
dead
that we
people
want to
started
dwell on
talking.
that too much, but anyway.
Yeah. I mean, well, I found out that I'm a medium, or that
Hmm.
I, have mediumship abilities. But I think this is, very, very common. Maybe it's not common. I shouldn't say that, because, not everybody will experience this. It doesn't mean something's not happening on your path. Your listeners know that by now.
Sure.
Yeah, but yeah, just being able to know what was going on with somebody, being able to see energy and to see where there might be blocks, and then correlate that to the chakras, and sit with somebody, and they would, the blocks would kind of maybe dissolve, or the energy would, get discharged and reorganize in the system. Um, Knowing things about people, having visions, having dreams. And for a while, I did mediumship. So if people were coming to me for energy healing work, and their dead uncle wanted to talk, then I was like, all right, let's do this. But in time, I stopped making that part of what I do.
Yeah. Is that what you meant when you mentioned cities in your bio? Or
Yeah,
were there other cities?
yeah. I mean, well, I haven't walked through a wall yet, but
Can you levitate?
not yet. But I'm working on it, because that'll be useful.
You could become a magician.
LA traffic,
Yeah.
right? Or just LA traffic.
Yeah.
Screw this! I'm just going to levitate to Santa Monica today. But yeah, just more like psychic stuff, and which I thought, okay, I guess I'm a psychic, and I don't know, somebody hooked me up with a reality show that was going to like do something on me being this psychic who was traveling the world, and then I was like, okay, that feels really wrong.
Yeah.
So it was a very tumultuous time. But around 2014 or so, I found Adyashanti's book, because I was lost. I was a little lost. I was apparently I didn't know how to Google non-duality, or what happens post awakening, but I just didn't. I knew that a significant shift had occurred, but I was lost. I was pretty lost.
Which is an interesting point, because here you were having, experiences that would make many spiritual aspirants envious, if envy were cool to have, if you're a spiritual aspirant, and yet you were lost. And what that highlights is the value of knowledge. Experience alone is only one leg, and you can't walk on one leg. You need the leg of knowledge as well.
Yeah. I just wasn't finding anything that said, hey, if you've had a significant opening or awakening, then, like we were talking about, the sediment is going to rise to the surface. Things are going to be in motion for a while. There's all that stillness, right? But then there's all that motion of the chaos, at least on my path. And then I found Adyashanti's book, The End of Your World, Uncensored Straight Talk on the Nature of Enlightenment. I think you know the guy.
I think I have it on the shelf right behind me, and I know the guy. We've eaten spaghetti before together.
Yeah. And so I was like, oh, and even just reading the first few pages, I sank into a deep, luminous peace, and everything sort of settled down. So I feel like sometimes just being seen and acknowledged, and it is enough to kind of cool all that energy that's in the system. I see you, relax. This is natural. This is par for the course. Nothing's wrong. It's going to be okay. It's not going to be like this forever. And so that book really, really, really helped me. And then things started stabilizing and integrating, I think, more after 2014. Thank God.
Yeah. There could be more, but it sounds like you've passed some significant milestones, and you may be on cruise control now.
Well, I mean, I then had an awakening in 2016, which was, far beyond the awakenings that I'd had before. So
let's talk about that in 1 second. I just want to, as a setup for that, I just want to ask you about the previous awakening. So the previous awakening had a strong witnessing quality to it.
Yeah.
And, you kind of saw through the nature of the personal self, and you weren't really making decisions. Everything was kind of on autopilot, I guess. And you probably felt like you weren't, the actor or the doer or anything. Somehow things were just, action was being done spontaneously, automatically by who knows what, right?
Yeah, and there was a
True
lot
so
of
far?
muscling too.
A lot of what?
There was a lot of like muscling too, because then a doer would try to summon a
To
doer.
usurp authority, yeah.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah.
Did you go through a seesaw phase where there was kind of a, and you talked about I got it, I lost it, but was that characterized by a sense of alternating surrender and control, where you, on the one hand, felt like sort of the divine was really orchestrating things and you didn't want to get in the way, but on the other hand, that could lead to passivity and there needed to be some initiative. And there was a working out of a balance between those two different tendencies.
Yeah, that was it was a confusing time because I felt very passive. I didn't feel like doing much.
Right.
And with the nature of things that I do, just being an actor and a comedian, there's a lot of efforting.
Yeah, you got to do something. Yeah.
That everybody's under the impression we need to be doing. We got to do the grind. We got to muscle it. We got to get out there and hustle. Mm-hmm. There was no hustle. I was, the only thing I felt called, the only doing that really felt continual was the teaching and the energy healing work and the, but with the acting and the performing, that, I would start, something in me would start to rise up and go, wait a minute, and grab a hold of it and go, but I'm supposed to be doing this with my life. And then there'd be a muscling and a contracting and a kind of pushing. So there was this feeling of pushing and then all right.
When you tried to push, did you get some blowback from nature, if you want to call it that?
Yeah.
Did you get resistance or, yeah?
Yeah, I think, I got into car accidents. I had illnesses that would just lay me up for a while. So I was definitely getting the message.
It reminds me of Aj's story where he was into this competitive bicycle racing thing, and then he'd have some profound awakening, and then he'd try to get back into competitive bicycle racing, and next thing you know, he'd be flat on his back for 6 months.
That's right. I would have to say...
Got other plans for you, kid.
Yeah, I got other plans for you, mister. That's kind of like what it was. I'd get back on the horse, and I'd start muscling the whole, I'm an actor thing, or, I'm doing stand-up. And then it would all collapse.
Yeah.
And I would be forced sometimes just to be flat on my back and just there's nothing I can do. I guess I have to really let that go.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've gone through a lot of that myself, and even recently some guy got in touch with me and he said, I had this awakening and I don't feel like doing anything. Well, there's no impetus to action. How are you supposed to act, when there's no sense of an actor? So there's this kind of gear shift thing that happens between sort of a sense of individual self being in control and this, there's a Vedic phase for it. They say Brahman is the charioteer. So you have to let go of the reins so Brahman can take them up.
Yeah, and that letting go has to happen. And some non-duality heads might be like, well, who's letting go?
Yeah,
There's nobody
blah,
there.
Blah.
Yeah, blah, blah. But yeah, and I think that contributes to a lot of the I got it, I lost it phase, which just, rule of thumb is surrender to what is. Whatever is happening belongs. Whatever is happening is needed. So we polish that facet of the diamond,
When you're going through the I got it, I lost it phase, did you have days where, during the I lost it aspect, where you felt like, I can't wait to go to sleep tonight so I can just be oblivious because I can't stand this gripped feeling of being lost again?
Yeah, and then I'd have like super weird dreams where some yogi was like stroking my third eye the entire night and I'm witnessing the dream. I
had the same thing, yeah. I mean,
did you?
I don't want to say me too many times,
this.
but I had the very same thing. This, on the forehead, like that, and then woke up in this profound state of, wow, what was that?
Wow, very cool. Yeah, these little gifts that we get. It was a dream. A few years after the Kundalini awakening, and I just was lying back in this yogi's lap. I'm still trying to figure out who that was. A orange robe, a turban, and I was the witness watching him as he just stroked my third eye, and then he looked up at me, you know, and just kind of nodded to the me watching, and then went back to stroking the third eye. And I mean, this was like an 8-hour long dream or something.
Wow.
And that was around the time that the psychic stuff was opening up, and you know, all that
cool.
kind of opening, like a bigger seeing, not just seeing things about myself, but seeing things about others and about life.
That's neat. I also had a thing one time where some being of some sort worked me over, had me lie on my stomach holding onto some handles, and then worked my spine up and down with some kind of implement, some kind of spear or something like that.
Spiritual chiropractic.
It was the biggest and most intense experience I ever had in my life. But
wow.
Anyway, I feel like I'm talking about myself too much.
Well, wait, but hold on a second. How did you feel afterwards? Like what?
Utterly released. It was as if I had been gripped by steel bands for all eternity, and suddenly those bands had been broken, and I just felt this awesome sense of freedom and bliss and relief and gratitude.
Yeah.
And I kind of walked around with my jaw hanging open for a few days, just kind of adjusting to this new condition.
Yeah, what the body had been holding on to. Our bodies hold on to so much, and and he was working your spine too, which is
it was like I was ushered into this room, told to lie down on my stomach, hold on to these handles, and somebody with a spear or a trident or something came and started stabbing up and down my spine with this thing, and it was like I held on for dear life, and it was excruciating but wonderful at the same time. And then when I came out of it, my body was drenched in sweat, and I was sort of lying in bed like this, and just felt like this huge relief of like, God.
What a chiropractic adjustment. Well, you know, network chiropractic, if anybody out there is interested in looking into, I think it's called network spinal analysis now. It's really great for clearing the nervous system through the spine of a lot of crap.
That's where the deepest stresses lie, I believe.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
And there's a whole Vedic understanding of it in terms of the subtle physiology and Sushumna and Kundalini and all that stuff, and the nadis, and the nadis, all that business.
Yeah.
All right, so you were beginning to. I asked you the question about the witnessing phase and about the juggling act between individual control and sort of divine control, if we want to call it that. But then you alluded to a more profound awakening, and I think you said 2014 or something.
It was in 2016,
16.
Which is why when you and I met in 2017, I was like, let me settle a little bit before I go that. And then I just woke up one day last spring, after having another dream in which, I'll go into that later, but where it was like, okay, I'm ready. I'll tell Rick. Let's those dreams. But yeah, 2016, I decided to go on another Buddhist meditation retreat. I'd sort of turned away from Buddhism. Like I was angry at Buddhism during that time. Like I was like, why didn't you guys tell me about this? About all the chaos. Why I want to just go back to the way things were. Well, not really.
Does Buddhism have the tools to deal with all that? I mean, somehow. I mean, I have not had a Buddhist path, but somehow I just get the sense that they don't really know how to deal with Kundalini and psychic abilities, or maybe they do, and I just don't know enough about it.
Maybe they do, and we don't know enough about it. But I couldn't find anything about the energetic awakenings.
Right.
The most I would get is sort of like, just don't pay any attention to it. Don't worry about it. And that's very helpful advice, to not fixate on it, don't attach to it, don't make it a new identity.
But you can't just brush it off. Sometimes stuff has to be dealt with.
You can't brush it off. Yeah. And, my teacher was helpful, with that, but, I needed some other type of guidance. So, during that time, I got really into, just managing my personal energy. When you've been blown open, so much, there is also a personal energy that we need to tend to, grounding myself, visualizations of being rooted to the earth, dumping energy, big breath in, dumping excess energy, just this kind of managing. I kind of figured it out on my own. I sort of pieced stuff together. But yeah, so finally I was ready to ready to go back to a Buddhist meditation retreat. And this one was like, 8 days and up at Mount Baldy Zen Center. And it was like the 7th day, I guess, right towards the end, because I like to wait till the very last minute. I'm always running late. And I was, doing this open eye meditation, holding the space of the mind. So this is another Padmasambhava meditation, just resting in the space of the mind, watching whatever arises, eyes open. And I was bugged by the perceiver, by the witness. I was like, there was a knowing that I am this awareness, and it's in me, you could say, if it had a location, and all around me is awareness. But there's this perceiver, there's this witness that's like in the way, and the
witness was not awareness. The witness was something other than awareness, maybe a vantage point of some localized nature.
It was a vantage point, but something shifted in that. I saw Padmasambhava's face, and I heard the perceiver is not a problem. And in that moment, everything went and dissolved, and I realized that the perceiver, it is the same as God, as awareness, as this isness. And I'm sitting in the meditation zendo with a bunch of other quiet meditators, and I start laughing hysterically. And I just, as soon as I left, I just wrote in my journal, I am that. I am that. And I'd never heard that phrase, I am that. I get emotional thinking about it.
Tuamasi.
Yeah. And I just laughed and laughed and laughed. And I mean, I could not stop laughing. It was hilarious and relieving. It was like the biggest cosmic joke ever. And
should try it in your next stand-up routine.
Well, we'll see. I'm trying to bring in a little more philosophical stuff. Now I'm getting back to it. But
Jim Carrey would like to talk to you.
Well, I'd like to talk to him.
He's really into this kind of stuff these days.
Yeah, he is.
And Russell Brand.
Yeah, maybe we'll cross paths. But yeah, so that the whole day was just spent kind of laughing hysterically and just in wonder that, I am that. Everything about me has always been that and always will be. It all comes out of the same thing, the same source. I woke up the next day at this meditation retreat, and I was like, well, boy, I got a lot out of this meditation retreat. Am I going to skip some of these meditations we're doing in the Zendo? And I just, stare at the trees and I was just in such joy. And then the last meditation of the day, I said, okay, I'm going to go sit and do this meditation. And it was a, Dzogchen meditation where you, eyes open, just holding everything's inside, everything's outside. Everything is inside, everything is outside. So you really hold that dualistic perspective, and then you toggle back and forth, faster and faster until it all, ideally dissolves. But that's what happened, is that all of a sudden, inside and outside dissolved. And again, like in 2011, I saw what I had always taken myself to be, and I saw her go down a drain, and I was sucked into a void for a while. I don't know how long. And when I was spit out of that void, I looked around and saw that I was the cushion and the Buddha statue and the floor and the window, and that I was everything and everything was me.
So the difference then between the 2011 one and the 2016 one would be that the 2011 one was a witnessing shift and the 2016 one was a unity shift. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. Okay. It was a shift into unity. Yeah.
And that was about 2 years ago, 2016.
A little over 2 years ago. And time and space collapsed, and the Sarah that I was, really felt like she died. Yeah.
So what about this thing Padmasambhava said about the perceiver is not a problem?
Oh,
Is there still a perceiver?
no. Actually, I left that out in the 2016 Shift into Unity. Right before the inside outside dissolved, I saw his face and I heard him say, "There is no perceiver."
Oh, okay.
And that, again, that pointer just went, that made everything dissolve.
So how does perception happen?
Well, I don't know. There is a perceiver, and yet there isn't. I mean, that was the thing that night, that as I was walking along, which I wrote about later in my journal, was, wow, there is no body, and there is a body.
Yeah.
There's no perception, and yet there is perception. Mm-hmm. So it was holding. My teacher said, "Oh, well, that's non-duality." So, and of course that has deepened, over the past 2 years. But yeah, all of it being held at the same time. The experience is that there's no perceiver, that there's no one holding or owning perception. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So to say that there's no perceiver, no body, no perception would be only half the story, because
That's right.
Because it's true that there isn't, but it's also true that there is.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's where a lot of non-duality heads get caught up. They're in a high level of duality.
Yeah.
They're stuck in the transcendent, or they've seen that form isn't all there is. So now they're like, well, nothingness is all there is.
Right.
Emptiness is all there is, man. It's like, wait a minute, what? Non-duality.
Both and.
Yeah, both and. Both, yeah.
Yeah.
And what has been happening has been a shift into all I can describe like a totality. Mm-hmm. So it's been persistent and abiding. What I am, this pure consciousness awareness, has persisted. But unity, maybe a year ago, started shifting, into something else, something that's still in the works, I guess. Mm-hmm. Something that's beyond unity, but the only one of the ways I describe it is like a totality.
Yeah.
David Buckland and I had a.
I was just going to ask you about David Buckland, whether you'd ever spoken with him.
Yeah, I did end up emailing him.
He has a very TMS orientation, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but he has this mapped out pretty clearly. And and I always try to read his blog posts, and I'll probably be interviewing him again pretty soon.
Good.
But okay, let me ask you a question. So, just as we just covered that perceiver, no perceiver, body, no body, both are true in the context of a larger totality, would it also be true to say that there is no sense of a personal self, and yet there is, and paradoxically somehow or other both of those can be held in the larger totality?
Yeah, I mean, Susanna Marie and Adyashanti gave a great interview with you. Mm-hmm. I think in the fall of 2016, was it?
Yeah, I think so.
About the falling away of the self.
Right.
That is what happens, beyond unity. Mm-hmm. And I think Susanna Marie actually just had an interview with Renata McNay mm-hmm. on living beyond unity, and she and I have been having a lot of conversations about it. So that'll be an interesting interview. But yeah, so I think Adyashanti calls it the falling away of the self. Mm-hmm. TMers might call it Brahman consciousness.
Yeah.
And I think it plays hide and seek a little bit until it falls away. But it's not like, oh, there's no body here. There's nobody here. The experience is that there is nobody here.
And
yet I am here. There's a body and a mind, and there's Sereness that arises. Sereness arises out of nothing and then goes back into nothing, just like Rickness arises out of absolute nothingness and goes back into this spacious potentiality. And so yeah.
If you were to summarize your experience in 3 phrases, would these three phrases be apt? I'm everywhere, I'm nowhere, and I'm right here.
Yeah. That would be part of how I'd describe it, probably. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I sort of feel it that way myself. But
Yeah.
I mean, I never quite felt resolved or settled with that conversation with Susanna and Adya, because, you know, knowing them both quite well. You know, for instance, that weekend, Adya was just getting over a terrible flu. In fact, we had to postpone the interview because, and he was telling us before the interview how he was sick as a dog. He got out of bed and basically collapsed to the floor, and, you know, Mukti had to help him back into bed. That wasn't happening to the tree outside the window. It was happening to this Adya guy. And there was a sense of, my God, I'm really sick. You know, there is some kind of me here that is feeling this. Even though presumably a deeper, perhaps even more predominant reality was there is no sickness and there is no me or anything else. But part of the package of the total experience was a severe flu that somebody was suffering through somehow.
You know, I think this is where words really fail. There's not a lot written about Brahman consciousness. There's not a lot written about experiencing no self. You know, Bernadette Roberts, right? She wrote that great book about it. Of course, it's, you know, her own experience with it. So she covers that terrain quite well. And I think Adyashanti, has, you know, maybe he has hats off to her with, you know, she's informed the work that he's doing now with talking about it and stuff, and Susanna Marie. But nobody's denying that there isn't a body.
Right.
And,
or that there is a body.
Or that there is a body.
You did a double negative there, so nobody.
I did. I ain't gonna tell you. You know, there is a body. The experience, I think, when people talk about this state of consciousness, which isn't really a state, it is, you know, again, words really fail, but it's about the experience of it from this vessel, this instrument. This instrument is experiencing, you know, Sereness right now, and then it dissolves. This instrument is experiencing, you know, hot tea, or the flu, but there's no separation. It's like the veil of, I mean, because even unity is a very, very, very subtle. There's someone there. There is the perceived sense of someone who is one with this computer right here, one with you. So there are two that are one. We're united, we're unified. So when that falls away, it's I mean, I know Maharishi sent me that interesting thing. He's sort of like, well, it's a deeper state of unity, which it's a flow. So I'm sure when Adya was collapsing on the floor, you know, with his flu, it's a flow with all of it. He is the flu, and he is the body collapsing on the floor, and he is the nothingness, and he is it's all happening at once.
Sure, but the experience was being had there in that instrument. I wasn't aware that Adya was sick, so I was off somewhere else doing something else, and so my instrument was not having the experience that his instrument was having. And so there's some kind of, the concept of Lesha Vidya may fit in here, that is used in Vedanta, which means faint remains of ignorance, that, you know, ultimately it's just all totality and there's no individuality, but that can't be, go ahead.
Thing of like, well, ignorance creates bodies, and that's why we're here, and that's why we're, you know, I don't know about any of that. I don't think anybody can answer whether that's true or not, but I think what Adya and Susanna Marie and what I'm starting to talk about too is really about, it's about your lived experience. And yes, experiences fade and they're not permanent, but words, I can't, someday I'll find words for it, but it doesn't feel like it's stabilized in me yet. So let's talk 2 years from now or something, you know. And Susanna Marie, you and Susanna Marie can probably have a far more colorful conversation about it than you and I could right now. But
maybe we'll do a threesome sometime, or a foursome.
Yeah, that'd be great. But you know, it's all included. Nothing is left out. And I think Adya has said it in some talk he gave, that it's eternity looking out through these eyes. So that is no self. Right. That is Brahman consciousness, and we've all glimpsed it. Everybody has.
Yeah.
Whether it stabilizes or, becomes a lived experience is, that's another thing. But it's eternity looking out through eternity's eyes. So, it's not just Rick, it's not just Sarah. And it goes beyond even like, oh, well, it's eternity and Rick.
Yeah.
It's something falls away where it's just this. So it's sort of like if, the realization in 2016 was I am that or I am this, now feels like something is developing that's just this.
This, without the I am part.
Yeah. Which, you go to see a comedy show and I'll be like, just being a goofball. But, that belongs too. It's all just this. It's all just happening. It's all just happening.
Yeah.
Which when people talk about this stuff, somebody can hear it and get intellectual about it, and the mind or the ego can get engaged and go, yeah, but I mean, there's no arguing with it, right? It's just, this is the experience, and this is what people have reported experiencing. So
yeah, well, I'm certainly willing to admit that my experience has got a long way to go, and that I'm doing my best to, based upon what I have experienced and what I have understood, to, understand this and to talk with you about it. But, when I hear somebody like God just say, well, I'm still a work in progress, and there's still development taking place.
Well, because we're human beings.
Yeah, so what is it that's developing? The instrument, right. But the instrument is not just a flesh and blood thing. It also has subtle components. And there's some kind of subtle thing which evolves even if the physical instrument dies. And you say Padmasambhava came to you, and people talk about Ramana coming to them, or various other sort of ascended masters and so on and so forth. So what is it that persists even when those human beings died and now they appear to be functioning on some subtler plane?
As far as that goes, I just feel like, somebody drops the body, their body dissolves, individuated
their
consciousness.
gross body dissolves.
Yeah, the gross body dissolves, but individuated consciousness gets absorbed back into the great consciousness, and their essence from when they were here also is still floating in the ethers, and maybe it's floating in the ethers for, this is my take on it, perhaps it's floating in the ethers for a second. But to us, on this gross plane, it's a lifetime, or it's several lifetimes that Ramana can, the essence of Ramana can come to someone, or Padmasambhava, or,
Could be. And we're getting a little philosophical here and speculative, but it's interesting to touch upon. I interviewed a guy a few weeks ago named William Meader, who has a background in the Theosophical Society, and he said, in their understanding, once you reach the sort of pinnacle of human evolution, as far as one can go in a human body, then you shift to the next phase, which you become a beginner again, relative to what is now attainable. Relative to what is now attainable from there, and that also jibes with the Vedic tradition's understanding of 16 kalas, or levels of evolution, which levels 4 through 8 being the human, and the highest human that ever walked the earth would have been an 8 or somewhere in there, but after that there's 8 more. So
sure, I can see that. Well, we're all just starting. We're all just beginning. We're all just, no matter where we're at, with everything that's happened, like I feel like, oh, now I'm really beginning my life.
Yeah.
I'm a bit of a late bloomer, but and Hollywood doesn't like old broads, but that's changing.
Meryl Streep is doing okay.
I think she's doing okay, but then again, she was Meryl Streep when she was, in her
20s, right?
Meryl Streep when she was, but there was no Meryl there. Ugh. But yeah, I feel like I'm starting. I'm just beginning. I was just telling my husband the other day, like, wow, I feel like I'm just now starting my life and just now starting to scratch the surface of what I can create as a comedian, as a performer, as a writer.
Yeah.
And so I feel like I'm starting over again. And then I see all like these young comics who are just starting out, and I feel like, hey, I'm one of you. And they kind of look at me. They're like, you're a little older than me. But yeah, so.
Well, see what throws people is that they just heard you talk all about how there's only this and there's no kind of person anymore, and then you launch into, well, I'm getting going as a comic and I'm doing this and I'm doing that, and so the language itself.
Language can't support this. It's all of it. Everything belongs. Everything is included. Now I feel like something is operating through me.
Yeah.
And so that is an operation. But even like a year ago, I was like still wondering like, oh, what am I doing? I'm doing all this spiritual work with people, but yet, there are all these creative impulses like, on my business card, what am I relatively speaking? What am I on the relative level? How do you, move forward? But life sort of takes care of it.
It does, and we have different roles to play, different dharmas.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's something moving me, and I have to say that I feel. I got surprised about it. That I still keep coming back to standing on a stage with a microphone, talking to people, because I think I was under some impression, especially after the 2011 awakening, when everything fell away and I didn't have any motivation to get on stage, that like, this is so not spiritual. It's all meaningless, man. Because there's that side of the coin, like, oh, it all doesn't matter. And it's all, there's this whole other dimension that we truly are. So all of this doesn't matter, all that shit. Which, if that's where we're at, that's where we're at. We kind of have to be, polish that facet of the diamond for a little while until we move on to another one. But yeah, it has been surprising over the years that I keep coming back to performing, because I think part of conditioning was, oh, that's selfish, that's for people who want attention, that's for, who knows, like all sorts of conditioning gets kicked out of the system. But then here we are. This past week I performed at a gay bar, a comedy club, and an alternative church. So I'm still doing this. So something is motivating me.
Sure. And I mean, if the kind of experience that has dawned in you can be thought of as the direction in which human evolution is heading, then, and if we could imagine a world in which a large percentage or even a majority of people had undergone such a development, then we're still going to need airline pilots and doctors and politicians and athletes and performers, and people will be doing many of the same things that we do now.
That's right.
We may not. There might be certain things which will become obsolete and totally inappropriate, and just as blacksmiths aren't very common anymore.
Yeah.
But sure. Nonetheless, I mean, you can imagine, just as when you had your awakening, the physiology sort of began purifying itself. You can imagine a society of awakened people in which all the various professions get purified by those people.
Well put, yeah.
Yeah. So you can imagine a politics, for instance, that's not full of all the crap that it now is, and medicine, which is based upon a much more enlightened consciousness, and so many different things.
Yeah, I do feel that entertainment and media is undergoing something right now.
Yeah,
for sure. I mean, just with the Me Too movement recently, there's been an expunging in Hollywood, and just in the comedy scene. The comedy scene is much more friendly toward female comedians now. It feels there's more. There's something has shifted, and so yes, I think that's well put. We need Wall Street brokers who are awake. We need pediatricians who are. We need, and then that's how humanity as a whole evolves. I feel like we're in a new age for that. In that, people who would discover these aspects of reality, or the nature of reality and the nature of self, or beyond self, would then, sit in a cave or sit on a pedestal and teach, and that's all they do, or, which was entirely appropriate. It's entirely, and it's still appropriate if that's what somebody is doing now. But I'm noticing that more and more people. I mean, I have people coming to me who work in all areas of life who have had awakening experiences and profound ones, through near-death experience or an ayahuasca journey or something, or childbirth, and they're like a producer in Hollywood, an actress, it's. There's a stand-up comedian who had an experience happen to her recently, who had no context for it, and I'm trying to explain it to her, and she's like, "Yeah, I don't know." But it's something's happening. Something's happening here.
There's that's Buffalo Springfield, and there's also something is happening, but you don't know what it is, do you, Mr. Jones?
Oh,
that was Dylan.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And, a lot of times people feel like, okay, well, we have to change the system. Politics is a mess, and we need to elect different people. Or medicine is a mess. We need to sort of change those systems, and, various other things we could talk about. But really, we need to change. Well, it's a crude way of putting it. We need to change. But the people who comprise these systems, once they change,
consciousness,
the horse will be before the cart, and the cart will naturally get pulled in the right direction.
Consciousness needs to change.
Yeah.
So all this other stuff is, like, oh my God, I can't believe what's happening. Consciousness is changing in individuals, in different arms of the one thing. All the consciousness is changing, and that will, it's just not happening fast enough. We want change now, but I think with these shifts. Now I'm like, oh, okay. So this is something that's evolving over, the next 100 or 200 years. Who knows what humanity is going to look like?
Oh yeah.
But we live these, 80 or 90 year lifespans, and we're like, it's not happening fast enough. Oh my God, what's going to happen? Who knows if things are going to clean up in the next 20 years? But in the next 100 or 200,
sure,
it's going to be different.
Well, nature has its own timetable, and
that's right.
And I'm sure it'll happen in something faster than geologic time. It's not like the shifting of continents, but and it seems to be accelerating.
It does seem to be accelerating, and when people look at politics and everything that's happening, they're like, "Oh my God, it's a sign that the world is, falling apart." I actually look at it from the healing perspective, in that, no, this is what happens when there's enough light.
Yeah. Yeah.
The dark comes to the surface.
There's a kind of a healing crisis. Yeah.
We're in a healing crisis.
Right.
That's what's happening. So everybody's, clutching their pearls, and they're, freaking out. But this is, with the deep healing, that whenever we go through healing as an individual, dark matter comes to the surface. What has been unseen, what has been in the shadow, comes forward into the light, and we experience it again. We feel it again. It tortures us again until it's sort of run its course, and it sort of dissolves, and that's the healing process. But humanity is going through a healing process.
Yeah.
More light, more awareness is being shown on that which has been in the shadow. So suddenly people are like, what? Racism still exists? What? Misogyny? I thought those women were fine. It's all coming to the surface. It's a healing crisis.
So we've gone off on some philosophical and societal considerations. And in our remaining time, I wanted to bring it back to you a little bit.
But there's nobody here, Rick.
Well, let's bring it back to nobody. He's a real nowhere man, sitting in his nowhere land.
Hi, Irene. I'm like, is she doing a yoga pose?
No, she's ducking under to open the dog door. We're all sort of juggling dog situations during these interviews.
Well, I love it because... What?
No one can see her, but Sarah can see you.
Oh, I can see her. You guys, Irene is doing some yoga. She's contorting, going through the door.
All right, I'm gonna. Well, go ahead. We can continue, but I'm gonna cut that part out. So let me ask the question I just asked again, which is, we've gone off on some philosophical considerations, which are necessarily somewhat speculative, and some, societal or considerations about what the impact of this sort of thing might be on society. And I think that's very important, actually. I mean, if you are a harbinger of, you and the kinds of people I interview are harbingers of what is to become a larger societal trend, more and more and more people having these sorts of awakenings, which is, I believe, what's happening, then I think that has extremely exciting implications for our world.
Yeah.
And, for how we might end up much better off than many of us fear. So we can even talk about, you can even respond to that if you want, but then I want to bring it back to a little bit more about you.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's interesting when you say that. It's like everybody's like expecting some sort of miracle. We need a miracle, but that is the miracle. It's just not arriving in a flash. It's arriving over time. Is that people who weren't sitting in caves meditating in the Himalayas for, 70 years or something are waking up. It's it's happening.
Yeah.
Now.
And that might have been happening 1,000 years ago too. I mean, Kabir was a weaver, and that he had that was his profession. Nisargadatta sold cigarettes. So it could very well. And we mainly hear about people who left an historical record of their teachings, but there could have been many people who didn't leave teachings because they weren't teachers, and they were just cobblers or something, and yet they had a profound awakening.
Yeah. I mean, and I meet people who are like, oh, that's kind of how I see things, but they don't call it that, or you Harry Alto, he's like, what the heck? Like he just sort of like came out of the womb like that or something, and
he's been like this all his life.
It abided, and he had that one moment where he felt like the ego closing in and the separation closing in, and he was like, whoa. Yeah. How do you guys live like this? I'm paraphrasing him. Maybe he didn't say it like that.
No, it was kind of like that. He was saying, I can't live like this. I mean, how do people do it? And then after about 15 minutes, it melted away again, and he was back to his usual state of bliss.
Yeah. You know what I do think that it's important to stress, too, is that since the awakening into unity in 2016, it's not like, rainbows have been shooting out of my butt, and I'm like, everything's great. Excuse me,
shucks.
I'm swearing again. Shucks.
That would be great on stage. But anyway, go ahead.
But there has been more clearing. Like just like 7 months ago. What is this? September of 2018. Right now, a big chunk of something cleared from my system, but it felt like more of a gut, a body. Release. That was the dream that we were talking about. Dreams. I just had like early at the beginning of this year, I had this primal fear dream. I'd never had a dream like that before. There's always a narrative in the dream, and often I'm aware I'm dreaming, and sometimes I'm just I say just knock me out. But there was no awareness in the dream. There was just total. There was awareness of this primal fear. It was just, there was no narrative, no story to it, just a primal fear, gripping dream. And it was completely terrifying. And I woke up and something had fallen away.
Yeah.
Something that the body had been holding. So I think the body continues to release long after, and stuff arises because we're in a body, and the neural pathways are still rewiring, and everything's still stabilizing and integrating. Like I was nervous for the interview. I felt there were nerves in the body. Which dissipated. I still feel like as I'm about to get on stage, but it's all everything. It's nothing. It's not a problem.
Yeah.
It's not a problem. So there just was this big, like gut release this past, just like 7 or 8 months ago, and that's when I woke up and I said something felt completely different. I felt like, I think I'm going to email Rick and tell him that I want to do the interview. Not because it was like, because I'm finished. I've completed my clearing out and I'm ready for, But it just was like, let's see what Rick is doing, and just being moved by something. So, at every step on the path of awakening, there is clearing. It just gets subtler and subtler and subtler and subtler. And especially if somebody has had trauma, the body, even just the cells, the tissues are, holding. Whereas like I think that consciousness, before waking up, consciousness identifies with the psychological self, with the me, to know that it exists. But the body identifies with suffering and pleasure, to know that it exists. So, if you've had a certain type of life or certain experiences in your life, your body may identify with being contracted, traumatized, So yeah, there are subtle clearings all along,
And who knows how many more there may be.
Who knows how many
You could be
more?
going through them 20 years from now or whatever.
Who knows? Who
Yeah.
knows?
I know that in the Vedic tradition, it's thought that the refinement is never ending, and
Yeah.
that if one were to live long enough, one could actually refine the physical body to become a celestial body.
Yeah.
And there are records of people having done that, supposedly. I think in Buddhist tradition there are records of people having done that as well.
The rainbow body.
Yeah, and that kind of stuff might be just mythological, fanciful stuff, but I don't know. But, from everyone I speak to, and I've spoken to hundreds, the vast majority do feel that there's going to continue, and there is continuing to be refinement. And in many respects, not just the body, but the senses, the intellect, the heart, all the various faculties that make us up. There's no end to. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just because so I might be awake or whatever, and look at my husband and not feel like there's any separation between us, but then also be really annoyed that he's doing something, or and then not have the facility to, or the communication skills yet, let's say. I mean, all of this is hypothetical. We have a perfect relationship,
of course,
but but not have the communication skills, let's say, yet to say, oh, you know what, that feels weird right now. I know it's just me. Hold on a second. So we're always developing. We're always developing our communication skills. We're developing our mental and intellectual understanding of how the physical world works. Of how relationships work.
Yeah.
So it's never ending. If you're in a body, then it does apply. We're works in progress.
Remember Peace Pilgrim? Did you ever read Peace Pilgrim?
But
she was this marvelous woman.
Yeah.
You look up Peace Pilgrim and you find it. There's this little book that you can read, and she basically spent decades and decades wandering around the United States with nothing but the shirt on her back and a pair of pants also, and just sneakers, just completely at the mercy of whatever happened.
Wow.
So people would pick her up, people would feed her, people would give her a place to stay, or sometimes they wouldn't, but she would just keep walking around the world, and she just had a shirt on that said Peace Pilgrim, and she was just this cosmic person. Very beautiful soul. She has a very beautiful face, and but anyway, she had this little chart in her book about the sort of the pace of evolution. And she kind of said, for a long time it just kind of goes like this, just a wavy line that doesn't go up, or maybe it's going up gradually, but it's wavy. But then she said, once you undergo a certain shift of the kind I think you've been describing in this interview, then it really begins to accelerate a lot more, because it's sort of like you're not in control of it anymore. You're not the one who's pulling the strings. You've surrendered to a much more wise and powerful level of nature's intelligence, and they can work out your destiny or your evolution. That can work out your evolution much more effectively than any sort of individual thing can. But anyway, that's a recommendation for everybody listening, to get a hold of the Peace Pilgrim's little book. It's probably free online or something at this point, and just read it, because she was a very inspiring figure.
Is she still alive?
No, she died a number of years ago. She was doing this, I don't know when, back in the 60s or 50s or something. But she's just a wonderful, wonderful person. And that little bit, I was reminded of that little bit about the evolution always continuing, but accelerating once the individual kind of gets out of the way.
Yeah, and I mean, and doesn't Ken Wilber say something about, we wake up, clean up, wake up, show up, clean up, and grow up?
Yeah, all that stuff.
I don't know.
And he talks a lot about the fact that those can be a rather out of correlation or out of sync. And they need to also to be brought in line for a full awakening to really be.
Yeah. Well, and also with creativity, with people who, because I work with a lot of creative people. It's how do you get out of the way?
Yeah,
and
yeah.
let that happen. So, when somebody has had a profound awakening, it's, they have some facility with getting out of the way, but that's really what's happening. We get out of the way, and life can move through us, or the symphony can move through us, or the play, or the words for something that we want to have. And you're familiar with Aurobindo, right? Sri
Sure,
Aurobindo.
yeah. I would
Yeah,
love
yeah,
to study him more. I hope to do that at some point. Or maybe I'll find
yeah.
an Aurobindo expert that I can interview.
Yeah, well, there's a good book called Adventures in Consciousness. I wish I could give a shout out to the author. I think he passed away, but yeah, Adventures in Consciousness is what it's called. And it's a pretty good, kind of summation of Aurobindo's work. And, I don't claim to really have studied him so much that but that's basically what he's saying, is that for evolution, evolution is happening. This is the evolution of humanity, is that, consciousness is now leading things, whereas the body was evolving. The body's been evolving, so now consciousness is evolving. I mean, we're kind of, our bodies are pretty good machines. I mean, we still have wisdom teeth and appendixes, and who knows what they're for.
Yeah.
But now it's consciousness's turn to evolve and to evolve humanity. So, and I agree with that. I think that's what's happening.
Yeah, I would say it always has been, and it's throughout the 13.7 billion year history of the universe, and this universe is probably only one of many. So that's always been the game. But I think, at least on this planet, we've reached a stage of biological evolution with nervous system sophisticated. We're not dinosaurs. We're not troglodytes. We have a level of complexity and brains large enough to really become vehicles for some very interesting developments to take place, and for a very interesting society to arise from those developments.
Yeah, definitely. I agree.
Well, Sarah Taylor.
Well, Rick Archer, what do you think? I think we're winding down. Let's not exhaust people.
Yeah, like
with our philosophizing.
P.T. Barnum said, always leave them wanting more. He also said there's a sucker born every minute, but
he did say that.
Yeah, but he was from Bridgeport, Connecticut, right next to where I grew up. But
you're a Connecticut guy.
Yeah, I was from Fairfield, Connecticut, and Westport. But in any case, Sarah, you're a good friend. We haven't spent a lot of time together, but I just feel a kind of camaraderie with you, and I've enjoyed having this conversation with you.
Me too.
And I would certainly want you to have the last say if there's anything else you feel has been left out. But I think we'll probably end up doing another one in a few years, and we can sort of have chapter 2 of this guy, or maybe we'll even do a group thing, with Susanna Marie and maybe Adya or whoever wants to be part of it. David Buckland. It would be fun. A few years ago I did this thing at Sophia University with like 14 or 15 people.
I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I didn't quite feel moved to do that again this year, although I could.
Well, there were so many people on that panel.
It was interesting. It was like this all-day thing, and I kind of like, maybe I'll do another one of those one of these days, and you could be part of it. But
sure.
Yeah, it took a lot of
of
finagling to pull that one off, and a lot of technical things, a lot of post-production editing, and all that.
I mean, and we had technical issues earlier this week. We weren't sure this was going to happen.
I know, your computer kept freezing up and all. Yeah. But in any case, this went well, I think, and I think people will enjoy it. And we didn't get any questions during it, but that doesn't matter. I think you and I filled the time. So I appreciate your time, and we'll see you. Hopefully, we'll see you out at Sand in a month or so. You gonna make it?
I think so. I think I'm going to be there. That's about a month from now. Yeah.
Yeah, late October.
Yeah.
And we'll take it from there. So. So I'll just make a few wrap-up points.
Okay.
I'll create a page on your website, on my website, about you and links to your website and all that stuff. I would recommend, if you haven't already done so, to create something on your website where people can be notified when your book is released, because I think it's going to be a real interesting book. And they may not want to be on your regular mailing list, but they might want to just be notified when your book gets done, whenever that's going to be. Okay. And so people listening to this, go visit her website, sarahtaylor.com, right?
Nope, sarahtaylor.org.
.org.
SarahTaylor.com is a real estate agent in Florida who fields my emails. She is so kind. Shout out to Sarah Taylor in Florida.
Oh, nice.
But it's sarahtaylor.org.
Uh-huh. Whitehouse.com used to be a porn site, and people would go there all the time. It's whitehouse.gov that you want to go to.
Well, it's good to know that.
These days, it sort of is a
Remember
porn
that.
site, even if you go to whitehouse.gov. But in any case, with apologies to the conservatives who listen to this.
I know, right?
So next week is an old friend of mine named Steve Briggs, who had all kinds of interesting adventures in India for years and lived and hiked in the Himalayas and claims to have met Babaji up there.
Yeah. I have his book. I read part of it.
Oh, cool.
Nice. Yeah, I'm in the middle of it.
Yeah, I see him every week when I go to play pickleball.
Great.
He's up there teaching tennis. Where it's going to be one of these, people who make Fairfield, Iowa an interesting place to live interviews.
Right.
And then the following week is this fellow I mentioned earlier who's written the book about,
Cool.
life, the decisions we make before we come into this life.
Yeah.
So,
That's interesting.
yeah. So stay tuned, everybody. And if you want to be notified of these interviews when they get released, subscribe on YouTube. And there's some kind of extra subscription thing you can do, I've been told, that make sure you get notified. And also subscribe to our little email list if you want to. It's on badcap.com. You can also subscribe to the audio podcast if you like to listen while you're commuting and stuff. So thanks, Sarah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Take care.
Thank you. Bye, everybody. Thanks for watching live.